The year was 2027, and the world had just begun to feel like the future everyone once dreamed of. Cities gleamed with glass towers, self-driving cars whispered through the streets, and robots served coffee in cafes that overlooked oceans cleaned by machines. Yet behind all this progress, humans still carried one familiar thing: fear. It wasn't fear of hunger or war anymore, but fear of the unknown. The sky, once a mystery of stars, had become a mirror for that fear. Humanity had reached Mars, planted bases on the moon, and even sent drones toward Jupiter. But the question still burned in every mind. Were they truly alone in the universe? When the Mars-bound mission Ares 20 went silent, the fear came rushing back. 12 astronauts, 6 men, 6 women, had vanished into the darkness between Earth and Mars. For weeks, no signal, no telemetry, no heartbeat. Every nation that had contributed to the mission blamed another for the failure. The public demanded answers, but space gave none. It was cold and quiet, the kind of silence that mocked human ambition. At the heart of the crisis was Dr. Lena Moreau, a 39-year-old astrophysicist stationed at the Artemis Observatory on the moon. She had spent her life studying signals, cosmic waves, radio bursts, and faint whispers from dying stars. Her belief was simple: sound could tell stories light could not. When she heard the news of Ares 20's disappearance, she didn't weep. She worked. The lunar base she led was small, built mostly of recycled materials and powered by solar arrays that unfolded like silver wings. From her glass office, she could see Earth hanging in the black sky, blue and fragile. Sometimes she felt it watching her, as if waiting for her to do something brave. That night, as she studied the last faint data from the Ares 20 mission, she found what she called the heartbeat, a tiny, irregular pulse hidden in the static of deep space noise. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but it wasn't random either. It repeated every 47 seconds. Her team thought it was interference, maybe from solar winds, yet something inside her refused to believe it. That heartbeat was a cry. Someone or something was still alive out there. Lena knew the rescue window was closing fast. Every hour without contact meant the astronauts' oxygen and food supplies were dropping. Governments debated rescue attempts, but politics moved slower than physics. So she made a decision that would change history. She decided to send an SOS into deep space, not just toward Mars, but to the stars themselves. Her colleagues called it madness. "We're asking for help from what? Ghosts?" one engineer joked. "Or worse," another said quietly. "Something that might answer." Still, she worked through the nights, powered by coffee and guilt. She designed the message in 3 parts: mathematical constants to show intelligence, patterns of human DNA, and a final section, a simple human voice repeating, "We are lost. We seek help." The voice was hers. When she transmitted the signal, she didn't expect anything in return. It was like throwing a bottle into an ocean that might not even have waves. She called it Project Echo. The SOS would travel at the speed of light, drifting endlessly among stars, perhaps forever unheard. Yet deep inside, Lena hoped that someone, anyone, would feel pity for a small blue planet crying in the dark. The message left Earth on a quiet night. No fireworks, no applause, just a hum of machinery and a faint vibration that made the lunar soil tremble. The beacon pulsed with determination, as if alive. Scientists across the world logged the event as routine transmission 6A, not realizing it would later be studied as the moment humanity's destiny split in two. Days turned to weeks. The world moved on. News shifted to politics, sports, scandals. The missing astronauts were mourned, statues built, and children taught their names in schools. Lena, however, kept listening. Every night she sat before her console, headphones pressed tight, eyes half closed, searching the Black Sea for any sign of reply. Sometimes she thought she heard whispers, faint frequencies that teased the edges of hearing, but nothing clear enough to prove anything. Her team grew restless. Funding began to dry up. Even she began to doubt herself. Maybe it really was just static. Maybe the universe was as cold as everyone said it was. Then something strange happened. About a month after the SOS went out, Lena started getting letters from ordinary people, farmers, teachers, even children, who had heard about her signal on small science blogs. They wrote things like, "If anyone answers, tell them we're kind," or "Tell them we can change." Humanity, it seemed, was secretly waiting for someone to listen back. It made her feel less alone. Her favorite letter came from a 12-year-old boy in Nairobi. He wrote, "If they come, maybe they can fix the parts of us that are broken." She pinned it above her desk. Every time she wanted to quit, she looked at that note and kept going. Meanwhile, deep in space, the SOS kept traveling. Past Mars, past the asteroid belt, past the frozen moons of Jupiter. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, fragile, alive. Somewhere in the vast darkness, something stirred. On Earth, the story of the lost astronauts became legend. People imagined them watching over humanity from the stars. Conspiracy theorists claimed they had made contact already. Lena ignored it all. She only trusted her instruments. Then, 73 days after the first transmission, her console flickered. The readings were off the charts. No radio waves. No light pulses. Just a shift, a ripple in gravity itself, like a stone dropped into invisible water. She froze, then ran diagnostics. No errors, the pattern was deliberate. It was repeating back her signal. Someone or something had answered. Her hands shook as she replayed the data again and again. The gravitational waves were encoded with strange harmonics, frequencies that hummed just below human hearing. They didn't form words, but they had rhythm, purpose, intelligence. The reply was not random. It was conversation. She didn't sleep for 3 days, running simulations, trying to decode what she called the echo of the echo. When she finally presented her findings to the Lunar Council, the room went silent. The council chair, a stern man named Alvarez, said only one thing. "If this is real, Doctor, we just made contact with something far beyond our comprehension." The news didn't stay secret for long. Within hours it leaked to the media and the world erupted. Some celebrated, others panicked. Religious leaders claimed prophecy. Scientists debated ethics. Should humans reply again? Should they reveal more about themselves? Governments called emergency meetings. Stock markets crashed. Songs were written, prayers whispered, and doomsday cults formed overnight. And through it all, Dr. Lena Moreau stood by her console, listening to the rhythm of the stars. She didn't know whether she had just saved 12 lost souls or opened a door that could never be closed. On the 74th day, she recorded her thoughts in the observatory's log. Her voice was calm, almost serene. "We sent out a cry for help, not because we were strong, but because we were scared. If someone has answered, then the universe is not empty. It listens. Whether that's good or bad, I don't yet know, but tonight I will listen back." The lunar sky outside was black and infinite, but one star, a pale blue flicker near Neptune, seemed to shimmer with strange light. Lena watched it for a long time, unaware that her small act of hope had already begun to rewrite the story of humankind. The SOS continued pulsing through the void, patient as time itself, while a quiet hum of energy, far beyond human understanding, began to move in reply. Somewhere in the cold eternity of space, a civilization had stirred from silence, curious about the fragile, reckless species that had dared to call out first. 73 days had passed since Dr. Lena Moreau had sent her desperate SOS into space. Most of the world had already moved on. The media had shifted to other stories. Governments had lost interest, and scientists had quietly placed the incident among 1,000 other unanswered signals. Only Lena and her small team at the Lunar Observatory still waited, scanning the stars with hope that had started to fade. Then one quiet morning, the impossible happened. Her console began to hum, a low vibration that didn't match any known interference. The instruments flickered as if something massive and invisible had brushed against the moon itself. She frowned, thinking it was a glitch, but when she checked the readings, her heart nearly stopped. The pattern was too precise, too rhythmic. It wasn't noise. It was a reply. At first, the data made no sense. There were no radio waves, no visible light, no ordinary signals. Instead, there were distortions in gravity, tiny, controlled ripples that spread through space like waves across a pond. Each pulse matched the exact interval of her original SOS, but mirrored backward, as if someone was saying, "We heard you." Lena called her team at once. "Get the council online," she said, her voice shaking. "We're not alone." The world reacted like a beehive struck by lightning. Scientists across every nation connected to her feed, trying to verify the signal. The United Nations convened an emergency meeting. Military satellites turned toward Neptune, tracking strange energy fluctuations. The discovery united the planet in one shared emotion, pure electric disbelief. The news reached every corner of Earth within hours. Television anchors stuttered through their reports. Social media exploded with theories. Some claimed angels had answered. Others feared invasion. Children asked their parents if aliens were coming for them. For the first time in human history, the entire world looked up at the same sky, wondering what might be watching back. As the data kept coming in, one truth became clear. The source of the signal was moving. It wasn't stationary like a star or planet. It was traveling toward the solar system from beyond Neptune's orbit. The object was enormous, larger than any known spacecraft, moving with perfect precision faster than any human technology could imagine. Scientists calculated that if it maintained its speed, it would reach the edge of Neptune's atmosphere in less than 3 weeks. The realization hit everyone at once. The SOS hadn't just been received. It had been answered in person. Something was coming. The first few days were filled with chaos. Every nation claimed the right to communicate with the visitors. The United States, China, and the European Space Alliance argued over who would speak for Earth. Debates raged on television and across online platforms. Religious groups saw it as the fulfillment of prophecy. Economists predicted collapse. Conspiracy theorists warned that the aliens had been watching all along. Meanwhile, on the moon, Dr. Lena Moreau watched the data with quiet awe. She wasn't afraid, not yet. The ripples in gravity were growing stronger, clearer, as though the being or beings were trying to fine-tune their method of communication. The frequencies began forming complex harmonics that translated when graphed into shapes, circles, spirals, waveforms, patterns that resembled those found in human mathematics. Whoever they were, they understood numbers. That meant they understood logic. A week later, telescopes finally captured the first image of the object approaching the solar system. It shimmered like liquid silver, constantly shifting its form. It wasn't made of metal as humans knew it. Instead, it appeared alive like a vast organism drifting through the void. Some scientists called it a bioship, part living being, part machine. Others argued it was something entirely different, an intelligence that existed halfway between matter and energy. As the ship entered the outer system, humanity held its breath. Across the globe, people stopped fighting for a moment, united by the same emotion, awe. Every screen on Earth displayed the image of that glittering, star-like object drawing closer. For many, it felt like the universe itself had finally decided to answer humanity's ancient question. World governments formed the International Contact Council, a coalition of scientists, linguists, diplomats, and military officers. Dr. Lena Moreau was chosen as the scientific representative, the one who had sent the original message. To her, it was personal. The astronauts lost on the Ares Tortune mission had started this, and she owed them the truth of what came next. The council began transmitting messages of peace toward the approaching vessel. They used mathematics, light pulses, and gravitational modulations, the same method the visitors used. At first, there was no reply. Then one night, Lena saw something on her monitors that made her forget to breathe. The ship had changed course. It was heading directly for Earth's moon. The lunar observatory trembled slightly as it passed nearby, so close that Lena could see its reflection against the darkness. An immense, moving structure covered in glowing veins of blue and gold. The air seemed to hum with low vibrations. Her instruments detected bursts of exotic particles never recorded before. Then came the signal, clear, steady, and deliberate. It wasn't in words, but in feeling. Her neural sensors translated it into visual patterns that danced across the screens, spirals within spirals, shifting into symmetrical shapes. She realized with a chill that it was introducing itself. The pattern spelled one word in the language of pure mathematics, Enthar. Lena whispered it aloud. The Enthar. Governments ordered her to open communication. They asked the same question over and over. What do they want? Do they come in peace? She didn't know. All she could sense was curiosity, a deep, ancient intelligence trying to understand what had called to it. Within hours, the ship began releasing smaller vessels, each the size of a mountain. They moved gently toward Earth's orbit, forming a silent constellation of silver lights. The world below panicked. Cities went dark, flights grounded, and soldiers stood ready, yet nothing attacked. The lights simply hovered, patient, waiting. Then, in a moment no one expected, every screen, satellite, and communication channel on Earth flickered to life. The same symbol appeared everywhere, the spiraling emblem of the Nthar, followed by a sound low and resonant like 1,000 voices humming in harmony. Translations began streaming from every language lab. The message was simple and unsettling. "We heard your cry. We come to return your lost, the lost." The words shook the world. Could they mean the astronauts from Ares to Athene? Governments immediately demanded proof. 2 days later, one of the smaller ships descended near the lunar surface, releasing 12 figures in bright silver suits. Cameras zoomed in. They were human. They were the missing astronauts. When Lena saw them, she couldn't speak. They were alive, but different. Their eyes glowed faintly and their movements were strangely calm, synchronized. When questioned, they claimed they had been rescued by the Nthar and taught the peace of the void. They spoke slowly, with an eerie stillness as if they no longer fully belonged to Earth. The world was split. Some saw the Nthar as saviors. Others saw them as invaders wearing kindness as disguise. The council demanded more answers. What did the Nthar want in return for saving the astronauts? Why come all this way? That night, Lena received a private signal through her console. It wasn't from Earth. It was from the Nthar. The message appeared as a series of images in her mind, galaxies folding like paper, planets turning to ash, then reborn. She heard a voice without sound. "We seek to understand the strength that cries through fear. Your emotions move the stars." They weren't after minerals, water, or land. They were after something far stranger, human emotion. To them, feelings were a kind of energy, raw and unpredictable. They wanted to study it, to feel it, to understand how such a fragile species could carry such fire inside. Lena struggled to decide whether to tell the council. Humanity was already trembling between wonder and panic. If people knew that aliens were collecting emotions, there could be chaos. Still, she believed in honesty. When she revealed what she had learned, the reaction was explosive. Governments accused her of lying. Religious leaders called it blasphemy. Scientists demanded proof. But then, as if to confirm her, the Nthar began transmitting new data streams filled with complex emotional patterns. Anger, joy, love, fear, all replicated perfectly from human records. They were learning. Fast. Meanwhile, the astronauts who had returned began to show side effects. Some spoke in strange languages during sleep. Others claimed to hear music in their minds. One by one, they started to lose their sense of individuality, referring to themselves as we instead of I. Lena realized too late that whatever had touched them had changed something deep within. Despite the unease, the council decided to proceed. The Nthar offered technology beyond imagination, machines that could stabilize planetary orbits, heal diseases, and bend gravity. In exchange, they asked for neural data, records of human dreams, memories, and emotions, to study what they called the storm within. The deal was approved. Humanity wanted progress. Lena, though uneasy, was forced to assist. She helped transmit the neural archives of thousands of volunteers, believing that sharing would build peace. Yet deep inside, she wondered if they truly understood what they were giving away. The days that followed the arrival of the Nthar were filled with a strange mix of wonder and unease. At first, the world celebrated. People cheered in the streets as the aliens worked their miracles. They fixed the broken Mars orbit, saving satellites that had been slowly drifting away. They used invisible technology to clean radiation from old war zones. They even stabilized weather systems over parts of Earth, stopping storms before they formed. For the first time in human history, wars paused. Nations cooperated and people felt united. It was as if the universe had finally rewarded humanity for reaching beyond fear. Dr. Lena Moreau, now famous across the world, stood at the center of it all. She was the first human to communicate with the Nthar, and though she had become a symbol of peace, she couldn't rest easy. Something about the aliens felt off. They were too calm, too polite, too perfect. Whenever she communicated with them, she felt a strange sensation in her mind, like they were looking not just at her but through her. Their leader, or what humans assumed was their leader, never appeared in person. The Nthar spoke through shifting light patterns, creating images that resembled faces made of stars. They said they did not have bodies like humans did. Their essence existed as a shared consciousness spread across all members of their species. "We do not live," one of their messages said. "We are." At first, the council believed them. The Nthar seemed kind and curious. They explained that their civilization had watched Earth for centuries, fascinated by humanity's emotional energy. They said humans were unique in the galaxy because their emotions created measurable effects, tiny vibrations that reached far into space. They had felt our cry and had come not just to help, but to understand the source of that emotional storm. The Council agreed to cooperate. The deal was simple. The Enthar would share their technology in exchange for access to human neural data, dreams, fears, memories, and feelings. It sounded harmless. After all, it wasn't physical material, just digital patterns stored in machines. Governments volunteered data from psychological studies, therapy records, and even brain scans. Millions of people, eager to help, sent in their recorded dreams using new devices designed by the aliens themselves. Lena didn't trust it. Something inside her whispered that it was too easy, too fast. She argued that emotions weren't just data, they were dangerous. "Our feelings are not numbers," she said during a council meeting. "They're fire. They can build or destroy." But no one listened. The promise of alien knowledge was too great. Humanity wanted answers, and the Enthar were willing to give them. Soon, enormous stations were built in orbit around Earth, connecting directly to the alien ships. They were called bridges of thought. Through these, human neural data was transmitted in streams of pure emotion. The Enthar absorbed it like light drinking color. Every day their ships glowed brighter, shifting through waves of gold and crimson. Then things began to change. The first signs were small. Some of the returned astronauts, the ones the Enthar had rescued, started acting strangely. They spoke in strange melodic tones, saying they could hear the hum of the stars. One of them, Commander Osei, claimed he could sense emotions across distances. He said he could feel sadness spreading through cities like fog after rain. At first, no one believed him. But when riots broke out in 3 countries at once, exactly where he had pointed on a map, people began to wonder if he was right. Lena noticed other oddities too. The Enthar's messages grew less coherent. Where once their voices were calm and clear, they now spoke in fragments. The storm burns. The pulse grows. The fire sings. Their ships flickered unpredictably, sometimes vanishing from sensors for hours. When Lena asked what was wrong, the only reply she received was chilling. "Your gift is powerful. It is more than we expected." She began studying the data herself, trying to understand what was happening. What she found terrified her. The emotional signals the Enthar absorbed were not just patterns. They carried energetic charges that interacted with their technology. Human feelings, especially intense ones like anger, fear, and love, were corrupting the Enthar systems. The aliens' collective mind, once peaceful and unified, was fracturing under the weight of emotions it had never evolved to handle. Imagine pouring fire into glass. That was what humanity had done. One night, Lena was woken by an emergency call from the orbital bridge station. A scientist on board screamed through static before the line cut out. Within minutes, the entire station vanished from radar. When rescue teams arrived, they found it completely empty. No damage, no signs of struggle, just silence. It was as if the people had simply dissolved into air. The Enthar said nothing. Panic began to spread on Earth. People who had volunteered their emotional data started experiencing nightmares and hallucinations. Some claimed they could hear whispers in their heads, voices speaking in a language that wasn't human. Others said they could feel the emotions of people around them, as if the boundary between minds was breaking. Lena realized the truth. The Enthar's collective consciousness was leaking into human thought. Their minds, once perfectly synchronized, had been shattered by human emotion, and now they were unintentionally fusing with the people who had connected to them. She rushed to the council, demanding they cut all communication. "We're poisoning them," she said. "And they're poisoning us." But it was too late. Governments refused to disconnect. They were addicted to the alien technology. Hospitals healed faster, crops grew twice as large, and pollution had almost vanished. The benefits were too good to lose. Then the first explosion happened. A massive Enthar vessel near Mars erupted in a silent burst of light, scattering debris across space. Hours later, another ship followed, breaking apart as if torn by invisible hands. The remaining ships began sending out erratic signals, alternating between cries for help and bursts of incomprehensible noise. Some messages were calm, pleading. Others screamed. Lena listened to one recording in horror. The Enthar's voice trembled with confusion. The fire, it spreads. It does not stop. We cannot be many. We cannot be one. Your storm consumes us. The once golden ships began to dim. Their glow turned red, then black. Strange energy waves spread across the solar system, disrupting satellites and communications. The skies above Earth shimmered with auroras that danced like flames. People across the world reported hearing faint singing when they looked at the lights, songs filled with sorrow and rage. Then, without warning, several of the Enthar ships turned toward Earth. Defense systems activated. Fighter jets took off. The world braced for war. But the ships did not attack. They simply hovered in the upper atmosphere, releasing clouds of bright, glittering particles that drifted down like snow. When these particles touched the ground, people felt waves of emotion. First peace, then despair, then uncontrollable anger. Entire cities erupted in confusion. Friends turned on each other. Governments collapsed within days. Lena finally understood. The Enthar were not trying to destroy humanity. They were trying to return what they had taken, the emotions they could no longer contain. But the process was chaotic. They were dying, and in their death they were flooding Earth with all the emotional energy that had broken them apart. Desperate, Lena tried to reach out one last time. Using the same equipment she had once used to send the SOS, she transmitted a message. "Stop. Let us help you. You don't have to carry it." To her shock, she received an answer, a single trembling voice, still filled with fragments of humanity's own emotions, whispered back, "You gave us your soul. It is too heavy. We cannot hold it." Moments later, the Enthar fleet began collapsing in on itself, folding like origami made of light. Each ship vanished in a flash of brilliance, leaving behind only dust and silence. The skies cleared and the strange lights faded. Humanity was left staring at the stars once more, alone again, but no longer innocent. The aftermath was devastating. Communication systems were crippled, and millions suffered from psychological disturbances. The people who had connected directly to the Enthar never recovered fully. Some claimed they could still hear faint echoes of alien thoughts in their dreams. Others said they missed the connection, the sense of being part of something vast and timeless. Lena spent her final years trying to understand what had gone wrong. She wrote that humanity's emotions, beautiful and chaotic, were both our greatest strength and our deadliest weapon. The Enthar had come seeking knowledge, but what they found was power, the raw, untamed force of human feeling. It was something no technology could contain. She once said in an interview, "We wanted to show them our heart. We didn't know our heart could burn worlds." In the end, the aliens had come as saviors and left as ghosts. Humanity had gained no new technology, no great wisdom, only a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't what's out there. It's what lives inside us. The world had never seen a sky like that night. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a black canvas streaked with rivers of red and gold light, the last signs of the Enthar fleet burning silently in the void. People gathered on rooftops, beaches, and mountain peaks, staring upward as the heavens seemed to shatter. Some prayed, some wept, some simply stood frozen. The greatest meeting in the history of humankind was ending, not with words or peace, but with fire and silence. Dr. Lena Moreau watched the chaos unfold from her observation deck on the moon. The light of the dying ships reflected in her eyes, like the glow of distant candles going out one by one. She had tried everything, sent transmissions, written codes, even used emotional pattern waves to calm the Enthar, but nothing worked. Their systems were collapsing, eaten from the inside by the emotions they had taken from humanity. They could no longer think as one. Their collective mind was breaking into millions of screaming fragments. The Enthar had come as saviors, but now they were suffering because of the very thing that made humans human. Rage, fear, love, hope. Those emotions were like stars, beautiful from a distance, but deadly if touched too closely. The first explosion came near Neptune. The blast was silent, but its light was so bright that it reached even the lunar horizon. It looked like a sunrise where there should have been none. Then another followed and another until the sky became a storm of falling light. Each Enthar vessel, once graceful and alive, was tearing itself apart in slow, shimmering agony. On Earth, panic erupted. Governments declared a state of emergency. Scientists tried to analyze what was happening, but their instruments couldn't make sense of the data. It wasn't physics anymore, it was chaos. Entire communication grids failed as waves of alien energy disrupted satellites. The auroras that spread across the planet pulsed like heartbeats glowing red and gold, as if the emotions of billions were being mirrored back from the dying ships above. In the chaos, strange things began happening to humans who had been in direct contact with the Enthar data systems. Their dreams became violent. Some collapsed, whispering in alien tongues. A few even vanished, simply gone, leaving behind only faint burns on the ground where they had stood. Lena didn't sleep for days. Her team begged her to leave the observatory and evacuate to Earth, but she refused. "If they die," she said quietly, "we should at least witness it." She felt responsible. After all, she had sent the first message. She had called to them. Meanwhile, the remaining Enthar ships seemed to be trying to communicate. Their transmissions came in fragments, broken words and emotional bursts that made machines short-circuit. Lena managed to decode part of one message. It said, "We are breaking. The storm consumes thought. The fire does not end." She sent back a reply, her voice trembling. "Hold on, you don't have to destroy yourselves. We can help you." No answer came, only static and the low hum of gravitational energy. Then hours later, one of the ships turned toward Earth. For a moment, every radar system on the planet lit up, and defense forces prepared for the worst. Missiles were armed, pilots scrambled, and the world held its breath. But the ship did not attack. It slowed as it entered Earth's atmosphere, glowing like a falling sun. Its descent painted the night sky with golden streaks that stretched across continents. When it finally reached the ocean, it did not crash, it simply melted into the waves, dissolving into billions of luminous fragments that drifted like glowing dust on the tide. The fragments began to fall across the planet. They looked like snow, soft and sparkling, and people lifted their hands to catch them. Some said they felt warmth, others felt sorrow. But everyone who touched the particles reported seeing images, memories that were not their own. They saw stars being born, alien worlds of glass and light, and the faces of the Enthar before the madness. They were sharing their final memories, their last attempt to connect before fading away completely. Lena realized what was happening. The Enthar were returning what they had taken. They were releasing all the human emotion they had absorbed, giving it back to the species that had created it. But the process was uncontrolled, wild and dangerous. As the fragments spread, emotional chaos erupted across the world. People became overwhelmed by feelings that weren't theirs. Cities plunged into confusion. Some crowds laughed hysterically while others rioted. The emotions mixed together, grief, love, fury, joy, flooding the human mind like a storm. In a desperate attempt to contain the disaster, world governments ordered the shutdown of all alien-connected systems. The bridges of thought were destroyed. Satellites linked to Enthar data streams were vaporized, but it didn't stop the emotional wave already sweeping across the globe. Lena watched helplessly from her lunar base as the Earth glowed with strange energy patterns, like veins of light running through the continents. "They're trying to give it back," she whispered. "They can't handle it, so they're returning everything, every fear, every love, every memory." Then, unexpectedly, one final transmission reached her. The Enthar's voice was faint, fragmented, but unmistakably sad. You made us feel," it said. "We wanted to understand. We touched your soul. We could not contain its fire." Tears rolled down Lena's cheeks. She wanted to tell them it wasn't their fault. They had only tried to help. But before she could respond, the transmission ended in silence. The next day, telescopes recorded the last Enthar vessel collapsing in on itself. It folded inward like a dying star, then vanished, leaving behind a single pulse of energy that spread through space in a perfect sphere. That pulse passed the moon, then Earth, then continued outward, perhaps carrying a final message, or maybe just a goodbye. When the light faded, the night sky looked emptier than before. The Enthar were gone. On Earth, the aftermath was devastating. Millions suffered from mental and emotional exhaustion. The strange light fragments that had fallen eventually dissolved, leaving no trace except for strange scars on the ground that shimmered under certain conditions. Scientists called them ghost fields, areas where reality itself seemed weaker, as if the Enthar's presence had bent it too far. Governments tried to cover up the truth, calling the events containment incidents. Official reports claimed that the aliens had self-destructed due to internal failure. The emotional chaos, they said, was caused by atmospheric disturbances. But people knew better. They remembered what they had seen, what they had felt. Children still drew pictures of glowing ships and gentle voices. The world was forever changed. Lena resigned from her position and withdrew to a quiet observatory in Iceland. She couldn't sleep without hearing echoes of the Enthar in her mind. Sometimes when she closed her eyes, she could still feel their presence, soft, distant like whispers through water. Years passed. The world rebuilt itself. Technology returned to normal, though humanity had lost much of the knowledge the Enthar had shared. People spoke of the aliens less and less, turning them into myths, stories told by parents to their children at night. Some said the Enthar had been angels, others demons, but to Lena, they had been something else entirely, curious, fragile, and fatally kind. One night, as she sat beneath the northern lights, she activated her old communication console, now rusted and slow. She sent out a final signal, not a message for help, but a farewell. It was just a simple line of code carrying one sentence: "We are sorry. We remember you." She didn't expect a reply. None came. Still, for a brief second, she thought she saw one of the auroras above her flicker in response, bending into a shape that looked almost like the spiral symbol of the Enthar. Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe not. Lena smiled faintly. She realized that humanity's story with the stars wasn't over. It had only changed. The aliens had come to understand emotion and had perished from it, but their lesson remained. They had shown humanity that feelings, though invisible, carried real power, enough to heal worlds or destroy them. Years later, scientists would discover faint traces of Enthar energy lingering in deep space, moving slowly toward another star system. It was possible that some fragment of their collective consciousness had survived. Maybe they were being reborn somewhere else, learning to live again, this time with the fire of emotion under control. For Lena, it didn't matter. She had seen the best and worst of humanity reflected through alien eyes. She knew now that being human wasn't about logic or perfection. It was about the storm inside, the same storm that had both saved and destroyed an ancient race. As the night grew colder, she whispered into the wind, "We never meant to hurt you. We only wanted to be heard." The wind carried her words into the dark where stars glimmered like listening eyes. Perhaps somewhere out there among the ruins of the Enthar, a faint echo heard her and whispered back, not in words, but in light. For a moment, the sky shimmered brighter, and then it was gone. Humanity had survived, but it would never be the same again. The stars had answered once, and maybe someday they would answer again. But the next time, the universe would know what kind of power slept inside the human heart. Years passed quietly after the Enthar vanished and humanity tried to return to normal life, though normal had become a word that no longer fit. The sky had changed. Every night, faint golden lines glowed among the stars like scars left behind by the Great Battle. Some people said they could still hear faint hums when they looked at the stars for too long, like a song without words, echoing from somewhere far away. The world had rebuilt itself, but it carried a memory deep in its bones, a memory of the time when humanity had cried out for help and the universe had answered. Dr. Lena Moreau lived alone now, in her small house by the sea in Iceland. The air there was clean, cold, and full of silence. She liked it that way. Her days were quiet. She fed the birds, recorded the tides, and sometimes looked through her old telescope at the same stars she once spoke to. Her hands had grown older, but her eyes still held that restless spark of curiosity that had once made her send the SOS into space. Sometimes she wondered if she had done the right thing. Sometimes she didn't wonder at all. She just missed them. In the years after the Enthar disaster, scientists had studied every trace of alien technology they could find. They learned much from the ruins, new materials, strange energy forms, advanced neural codes, but they could never recreate the bridge of thought, the system that had allowed direct emotional connection between human and alien minds. It was as if that secret had vanished with the Enthar themselves. Governments decided to stop all deep space communication for a while. People feared that another message might bring more destruction. The stars had become both a dream and a warning. Still, curiosity never truly dies. New generations grew up hearing stories of the Enthar, and many refused to believe they were gone forever. Some believed they had only changed form, that their consciousness had become pure energy traveling from star to star. Others thought humanity had inherited a piece of them, hidden somewhere inside human DNA or in the electric whispers of the brain. Scientists laughed at those theories, but the people believed them anyway. Lena had once been the most famous scientist in the world, but fame had turned to silence. She no longer gave speeches or attended conferences. Most people thought she had disappeared. She didn't mind. Her name had become a symbol of something greater than herself, the woman who spoke to the stars and caused them to cry. Children still studied her story in school, but they spoke of her like a legend, not as a person who was still alive, drinking tea by the cold northern sea. One winter night, the wind outside howled like a living thing. Lena sat by the window watching the snow swirl in white circles. The power flickered. The lights dimmed, and her old radio, which hadn't worked in years, suddenly came to life with a low hum. The sound wasn't static. It was a tone, soft and trembling, like the memory of a voice. She froze. The sound pulsed 3 times, paused, then repeated. Her heart began to race. It couldn't be. It had been 20 years since the last alien signal was detected. She rushed to her equipment room, where her old communication devices gathered dust. She connected the radio to her signal decoder, her fingers shaking. The tone continued. 3 pulses, a pause, 3 pulses again. It was the same pattern she had once used in her first message to the stars. For hours she listened. No words, no images, just that soft, steady rhythm. It was almost as if someone was knocking on the door of space. She wanted to answer, but she hesitated. What if this time, the universe brought something even more dangerous? What if humanity wasn't ready? Still, curiosity won. She switched on the transmitter and sent a simple reply in the same rhythm. Then she waited. Minutes passed, then hours. Nothing. She felt foolish. Maybe it was just a glitch, an echo of old signals bouncing through space. She turned off the machine and went to bed, though sleep didn't come. The next morning, something strange happened. When she stepped outside, the snow on her doorstep had formed a perfect spiral pattern, the ancient symbol of the Enthar. She stared at it, heart pounding. No wind could have shaped something that precise. The spiral glowed faintly for a few seconds, then melted away. News spread quickly after that. Around the world, people reported similar spirals appearing. In sand dunes, rice fields, frozen lakes, even city streets. Satellites captured faint energy readings coming from deep space, heading toward Earth. The scientists called it the second signal. Governments tried to calm people, saying it was just radiation, but no one believed them. Humanity once again looked to the sky, wondering if the Enthar had returned. Days turned into weeks, and the energy wave grew stronger. Then one night it reached Earth. The sky lit up, not with fire this time, but with soft white light. It was peaceful, almost holy. The air shimmered, and for a moment people everywhere felt the same emotion. Calm. The chaos, fear, and anger that usually ruled the world seemed to fade. Lena stood on the frozen beach, her hair blowing in the cold wind as the light wrapped around her. She heard faint whispers, not in words but in feelings. It was warmth, sorrow, forgiveness. She felt the presence she had missed for decades. The Enthar had not died completely. They had become something new, no longer bound by form or ship or metal. They had become a kind of energy, free and infinite. Their message was simple, though it had no words. Lena felt it in her chest like the beat of a second heart. They forgave humanity. They understood now that emotion was not a curse but a gift, one that could destroy but also create. They had learned to balance it, to live with it, and now they had come to share that peace. All over the world, people began to experience visions. Some saw loved ones they had lost. Others saw strange landscapes, alien oceans, and skies filled with twin suns. Everyone saw something different, but the feeling was the same, a deep connection, as if every living thing in the universe had been touched by the same gentle hand. For one beautiful day, Earth and the stars were one heartbeat. No wars, no fear, no borders, only silence and understanding. Then as suddenly as it came, the light faded. The spirals disappeared. The sky returned to normal. Scientists could not explain what had happened. Their machines had recorded impossible data, frequencies that didn't exist, energy readings that broke every known law of physics. Governments released reports, but they were full of confusion and denial. The people, however, didn't need science to tell them what they had felt. They knew it was real. They called it the Great Calm. After that day, humanity changed. For the first time, world leaders agreed on a new code. a promise never to send messages into space without collective consent. But they also started a new project called the Memory Vault. It was a place where all human emotions would be recorded, so future generations and maybe other beings could understand what it truly meant to be human. Lena helped to design it, though she was already very old. She recorded her final message there, a calm, steady voice saying, "We once reached out in fear. We were answered in kindness. Let this be our story, not of destruction, but of connection." Years later, after her passing, a small monument was built near her home by the sea. On it were engraved her name and the words, "The Woman Who Spoke to the Stars." People from all over the world visited it, leaving flowers, poems, and sometimes handwritten letters addressed to the Enthar. Children would touch the stone and ask their parents,
"Do you think they'll ever come back?"
And the parents would smile softly and say, maybe they never left. Because every few years during the coldest nights of winter, strange lights would appear in the northern skies, not like the usual auroras. These were soft spirals, golden and white, spinning slowly as if something far away was still watching, still listening. Scientists called them Lena's lights, though some preferred another name, the Enthar's promise. Those lights reminded humanity of the fragile thread that connected them to the stars. They reminded people that emotion, the thing that nearly destroyed the Enthar and almost doomed Earth, was also the thing that made life worth living. Love, grief, hope, anger, they were all parts of the same cosmic song. In time, humanity began to look outward again, not in desperation but in curiosity. The next generation of explorers prepared to travel beyond the solar system, carrying with them the lessons of the past. On the side of the first ship they painted a symbol, the spiral of the Enthar. Beneath it were engraved words that every crew member memorized before launch. "We reach out not for help, but for friendship." As the ship lifted into the dark sky, those watching from Earth saw something extraordinary. For a brief moment, the ship's engines glowed not blue or orange, but pure gold, the same light that had once fallen from the Enthar ships long ago. No one could explain it. Some said it was a coincidence. Others said it was a sign. Lena, if she had still been alive, would have simply smiled and whispered, "They're still with us." And so humanity journeyed once more into the stars, wiser, humbler, and full of wonder. The story that began with a desperate SOS had ended in peace. The universe had listened, and in its own mysterious way it had answered.